All right, good evening. This is the Guilford Board of Education. Tonight is Monday, May 24th, and we welcome you to our workshop meeting. The first order of business, actually, I'm going to ask my colleagues if we can add an item to the agenda. It would be item number 4 after the COVID update, which is approval of the graduation date. This is something we do every year. And so since it is the end of May, it would be a good idea to make sure we do it tonight. So if I could have a motion to add the graduation date, approval of the graduation date. Second, thank you, Mr. Sands and Ms. Sullivan. Any concerns? All in favor? All right. Wonderful. Okay, so I'm sorry. I'm just going to explain to the viewing audience that we are here in Guilford High School. We're meeting in person for the first time in a while. We are all wearing masks and asking any public who is here to wear a mask as well. Although we are allowing people to take their mask off while they're talking so that they can be better understood. So the first item on the agenda is to discuss the OPEB Trust. This is a carryover from our last meeting where this item was introduced. We do each have a copy of the OPEB Trust that we're going to be discussing today. For the viewing public, this is OPEB stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits. We have with the town each been paying OPEB benefits to a number of our employees after they leave Guilford, after they retire, Guilford Public Schools. But this is an approach to creating a trust in order to better keep track of those funds for a number of other reasons, which we'll hear from people who will explain it much better than clearly I am doing at this moment. We do have with us a couple of guests. First Selectman Matt Hoey is here.
Good evening.
And Attorney Richard Cohen is here, available to us for questions. I know when we started this conversation a couple of weeks ago, we had some questions, and so are grateful to both of them for joining us tonight. And so I do want to start with, I guess we can start with questions. We did have a conversation. I know Attorney Cohen walked us through some of this process last time we met. So I guess I'll first ask if there's anyone on the board who would like a summary again of what this is about. And that is a perfectly reasonable request, seeing that when we met last week, 2 weeks ago, we didn't have the document in front of us in the same way. So would it be helpful to have a summary of this? I'm seeing nods. Wonderful. So either Mr. Hoey, would you be able to do that?
I'll be happy to start, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for the opportunity. And my apologies if I may have misheard you. If this item was only introduced to you as a group at the last meeting, my apologies for not having engaged you in a more thorough manner. We've been talking about this issue for a couple of years.
Yes.
And we may have been talking like happens so often. We talk in bubbles because we talk. We think we're talking to everybody we need to talk to. So it's my apologies. This has been a priority of the Board of Selectmen for a couple of years. Our Finance Director, Mary Jane Malavasi, who apologized for not being able to be here in person, owing to the fact that her husband had surgery today. I think a pretty good excuse. Had been insistent that the board take this issue up. And you've summarized it pretty well. These are benefits that are accrued to individuals once they retire based on contract negotiations, fair bargain contracts. And the Board of Ed has some, the town has some. And most of those have to do with health benefits. So the way we handle it today is we pay as we go. And that liability has grown over the years. And I think the most recent numbers are somewhere around $35 million. I used to use 28, but I think that number has grown. It's about 35 million. For anyone who pays attention to what has happened to statewide financial conditions, one of the biggest problems we face in this state is our unfunded pension liabilities. Well, the next balloon in the municipal and state government world are the unfunded liabilities relative to post-employment benefits. So we literally right now have $0 in a trust for a $35 million obligation, which will continue to be there for many years. So we and Mary Jane, at also the insistence of our auditors, suggested that we look at this issue. Because as I said, today we pay as you go. So your budget is comprised, your healthcare component of your budget goes to cover a portion of the retired employees' benefits. So it's not too bad to keep bumbling along and doing that, but prudent fiscal management suggests there's a much better way to do that. There will be some challenges getting to a point where the trust will actually be able to relieve us of having to pay as we go. So there will be a period of time where we will not be able to utilize the funds from the trust like we would a traditional pension. So that's an issue that everyone needs to be aware of, particularly from a funding perspective, because at some point we're going to be funding the trust and we're going to be funding the pay-as-you-go. And we have been, for those of you who have paid attention to Board of Selectmen meetings, which usually means you have insomnia, you will have heard us talk about that, and particularly during budget time, that this will be an emerging issue for both boards over time. We've been fortunate enough over the past few years to get our friends at the Board of Finance to agree to contribute some of the excess funds from our health benefit account, our health account, into a designated fund. The process we are about to do now, and please correct me if I'm going anywhere offline, and I know you will. We will now move the funds that have been earmarked for the OPEB Trust into that trust, so they can start to be managed in a similar fashion to the assets we have for our pension. They will be managed by the same individuals, which is the pension board. They will have the responsibility for working with our financial advisors have changed names twice since we hired them a couple of years ago. But suffice to say, it will be the same process. We will be investing largely the same way. There are different sets of expectations relative to rates of return for healthcare benefits versus pension benefits. For most of you who have, everyone probably has healthcare account or healthcare insurance. The curve on that tends to go a little bit differently than the curve on what is going to be needed for pension, because those are defined. A pension obligation is a defined number. Healthcare is a variable, so that there is a different set of challenges relative to investing. But more importantly, it has to do with the assumed rates of return. We have gotten, as a community, and the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance have both marched down this path over a couple of years. We have dropped our assumption rate, which is the assumed rate of return on our investments, down to 66% from what had been a high of 8% several years ago. Guilford is among the leaders in the state in terms of moving that bar. And I know Ted's nodding his head because he's been at pension committee meetings, and we have consistently gone with the recommendation of Milliman to drop that rate. And Ted, you can comment on this, but I think we're probably going to wind up going even further than we've gone so far at some point. But suffice to say, we are in a great position right now relative to our peer sets throughout the state of Connecticut.
Or relative to the state.
Yeah. If we start getting in your neighborhood, you and I need different jobs. So again, that's the nature of the trust. I hope the information I gave you wasn't redundant to what you had already had, but it's a level set in terms of how we do it now, how we're going to do it in the future, and then the challenges, how we get there. And there's no doubt it will cost the taxpayers more in the short term, but over the long term, like our pensions, where we have an opportunity to earn on the money we set aside, then it will save the taxpayers in the long run. So again, I apologize for any information that you guys already had. And I would certainly answer any questions at this point, regardless of the questions that were presented beforehand.
Well, thank you. And no apologies necessary. I will take responsibility as a chair of the board because I have been in some of those meetings. And much like what you were saying, sometimes you forget what is being communicated to only you versus to the board. So very much appreciate. You also are able to describe it in a way that is clearly much more eloquent and informed that I would. So it's important. But I do want to now give my colleagues a chance to ask some questions. Go ahead.
Thank you. Quick question. You started off with the summary. You mentioned there's going to be an anticipated period of time for the dual funding where you use the pay-as-we-go and the trust.
Right.
Do you have an idea of how long that period would be?
I don't want to commit to one. Part of that has to do with the funding ratios that we agree on, and we're all going to be needing to do that at each budget session. It's anticipated that we're probably 8 to 10 years away from being able to use any significant funds. Now, that depends on how much we put in. We have been very, very successful in building that number from 0 to 1.2 in the last year. And that's largely on the backs of the surpluses in the healthcare account. You guys probably don't get presented the gross numbers, but we're probably going to be running another $600,000 to $700,000 surplus in that account today. Not today, but this year, excuse me. And the total excess fund balance in that account is going to be about $6.5 to $7 million. So we, Mary Jane and myself, in our discussions with the Board of Finance during the budget season, and it was probably, I know it was baked into my presentation, that if we continue to go along this way, that is a funding source that we should capitalize on, primarily because it has met some of the smell test, if you will, relative to the appropriate use of those excess funds, because they are employee benefit funds. So if we can continue to grow that quickly over the next couple of years with excess funds, that will shorten that window. I can't give you exact numbers on it right now. I don't have them. I've not seen them either, so.
I do know that, Mr. Rowan, one of the questions that came up last time is, and certainly the trust speaks to some of this, just some questions about how Board of Ed funding goes into and out of the trust.
Right.
Certainly there's language here, and Attorney Cohen helped walk us through some of it last time, that speaks to creating actually a sub account. Right. And some tracking of that. But I know there was some concern just because of difference, different employees, different number of right. employees, perhaps different benefits. Right. Just understanding how that would work.
Right. It's no different than how we handle the pension today. Ted, you want to?
Well, I wanted to just expand on
Great.
that question. Perfect. Really, because in the document, it does talk about the sub accounts the way we have in the pension. Okay. And in the pension, the town puts in for the police and the town employees, and the Board of Ed puts in for the Board of Ed employees. Right. If we're going to be funding the OPEB Trust from the surplus in the health account, the health account is a joint account between the town employees and the Board of Ed.
Correct.
But about 70% of the contribution into the trust comes from the Board of Ed.
In those years that you fully fund it, yes.
The health portion.
Yes.
Yes, that's correct. And as I look at the obligations for OPEB between the town and the Board of Ed, the preponderance of the obligations are on the town. So I'm a little confused as to how this is going to work if the surplus in the medical fund is the primary source revenue for whatever.
Did you have the benefit of the materials that Mary Jane forwarded along? The answers to some of those questions? No? Okay.
I do see Mrs. Trudeau raising her hand though, so
Yeah.
it sounds like you have a question.
So the balance that's in the medical trust, we cannot say for certain that the majority of that is the Board of Eds. We'd have to go back to the day that we started the medical account being self-insured. We'd have to look at what the town contributed, what the Board of Ed contributed each year, as well as what claims were paid for Board of Ed employees versus town employees. It is very possible that if the Board of Ed had some very large claims over a number of years, that maybe we don't have a larger share of that fund balance.
So we may have been putting more in every year, but we may have been drawing more out in payments every year because of a larger number of employees.
May, but the
Right.
presumption would be, since we have more of the employees. And we put, and the payment is per employee, that the bulk of the payments that are going in have been from the Board of Ed.
Right. One of the suggested answer to that question, which was raised, and I don't, did you got this copy from Mary Jane, right? You got this information today?
No, she didn't, she just said they
Okay.
said that she gave them to you.
That question was asked, how will the funds that have been designated for the trust be allocated between the town and the board? And Mary Jane and I have had the conversation, and we've had some conversations with the attorneys. And we feel that the first way to allocate those funds would be by the percentage of the liability, not the percentage of employees, but the percentage of the long-term liability for each entity going forward. We feel that's the fairest way to do it, so.
Mr. Hoey, I've been included in conversations with Mary Jane on that same topic,
Yeah.
and I was of the same opinion that I thought that was the fairest way to do it.
Right.
Because there is no way of telling what the balance was from the medical trust and what the allocation was, but using that percentage of the liability was
Agreed. Thank you.
reasonable. way to do it.
Yeah, and we have some time to decide that. So I think one of the things that I think needs to be done, and I believe we agreed to a methodology to determine how some of these funds would be used between the three boards. Because there were some challenges a couple of years ago relative to skipping some of the payments. And then the use of those funds going out. So I think if we were to suggest that the three boards designate an individual from each board to act as a representative to validate what Linda, Mary Jane, and I have suggested. So that would include a representative from the Board of Finance, a representative from Board of Ed, and a representative from the Board of Selectmen, who are empowered to make a decision on behalf of the board. Because we have a limited time frame here. I understand it's mid. Board of Selectmen meets next on the 7th. So there may be an opportunity to have a meeting prior to our board to get approval. But I would think that perhaps the chairs, the two chairs of the Board of Finance, Board of Education, and perhaps myself or designee.
So,
would-
Mr. Hoyer, you're not speaking about the designee, the Board of Ed designee, or the Board of Finance designee, the Board of Selectmen designee to the trust
No.
group, which is
Well,
fine. You're talking about an
It's your choice.
additional group.
I would suggest it's up to the board's choice as to who that designee should be for that decision.
I think, first of all, I'm Richard Cohen, mystery man here. By the way, it's a beautiful school, and I enjoy coming in and seeing everyone here.
Thank you.
Life different than when I went to high school. So congratulations on that. The trust, and 2 weeks ago, we talked about one particular section of the trust, and I think that's what was sort of, we want to dig into this. This is 4.2 of the trust agreement, the OPEB Trust, and it talks about the procedure, and it actually is defined as the OPEB funding and appropriations procedure. And it talks about, commitment by the board and the town to come up with a procedure, and this may be what the first selectman was referring to,
Right.
a committee of three to take on this task. But there really does need to be, whether it's an MOU or some other written procedure, that will sort of put the flesh on the bone here, of what's gonna happen. You know, the Milliman, Sherrod, who's also the actuaries for the pension plans. Town has engaged Milliman for also the OPEB. So Sherrod Arroyo, is that how you pronounce it, Sherrod's last name? But anyway, Sherrod has to do a evaluation of what the board's funding obligation is going to look like and what the town's funding obligation is going to look like. And it's similar to the pension. It's going to be like a 10-year schedule, maybe 90,000 a year, maybe 50,000 a year. But that's going to be sort of the roadmap for each entity to be putting in the requisite amounts. It's not just going to be a number that's picked out of the sky.
So I think the suggestion I heard from Mr. Hoey is that a similar conversation be had about any time that money is withdrawn in bulk from the medical surplus fund. So that would apply to our annual contributions until we finish the pay-as-you-go portion. But when there's going to be dollars taken out, that this committee of three with Sherrod create a similar structure for when monies are withdrawn from the medical surplus fund. Makes sense.
I think so.
You know, currently, yeah, I think that's a good idea, for sure.
Was his.
Currently,
First one this year.
the OPEB
It's taken me a
Trust-
while.
The OPEB Trust refers to this as a single plan. But then there's an exhibit that references multiple plans.
Well, there's some.
Right, but what I'm sort of getting at is that I believe the Board of Ed retirees and the town retirees, for the most part, have the same Anthem health plan.
No, it's all
They-
self-funded. We're self-funded at this point, Richard.
But isn't there a I mean, yeah, I know you pay the claims, but Anthem.
Anthem's our third-party administrator.
Yes.
Right.
They're our TPA.
What are the benefits the same? Is it the same benefit package?
Well, no,
Yeah.
I don't think so, Richard. That varies bargaining unit to bargaining unit
Okay,
in some
so
cases.
Yes.
So your Board of Ed retirees are generating claims. They get paid by the trust, or they get paid out of the general fund currently. And as the first selectman said, you're gonna have a period of years where you're not gonna touch the trust. You're gonna try to let the trust build up. So that's not gonna change. Your existing retirees on the Board of Ed side are going to the doctor, having claims. And town's general fund is paying those claims. So you're gonna keep track of that. What I gather is the surplus that's been built up is gonna be closely tracked. And it's gonna be, I guess it's gonna be, is it gonna be drawn down to zero?
No.
Mr. Howie, is it?
No, because we need to pay current bills out of it.
No, the medical fund always has to have some surplus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because
So when you're talking about the seed money,
year to
right,
year.
but when you're talking about the seed money that's gonna go into the trust, and it's gonna be.
Allocated to the two sub-accounts.
The future liability,
Right.
it's not gonna take 100% of the surplus. Well, that's gonna be worked out. It's
Yes,
gonna be
that is to be worked
by
out. That's right.
whatever
That's right.
Right.
committee
And
you
There needs to be a
form.
formula.
And then I think there's a set of financial management questions that we need to talk about. Are we, when we, the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen, with the approval of the Board of Finance, determine what our health contribution is on an annual basis for the thing? Do we actually extract from that the portion that relates to the retirees and move that money over?
Mhm.
There's a significant challenge with that. It's called an implied subsidy. And the implied subsidy is that we do health insurance on a macro basis with all of our employees. If you start to pick and choose and say, the contribution for this band, all right, your numbers are going to be skewed significantly. 70-year-olds don't have an awful lot of children. All right. So there is an implied subsidy in the healthcare world that the young subsidize guys like me, all right? So we need to be very careful about how we start looking at that and say, well, do we take that piece out and move it over, or do we continue to do it the way we do it today? I think it may be prudent for us to continue to do it the way we do it today until such time as we are comfortable that we'll be able to pay as you go out of the trust. Just one man's opinion.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And I will say, and again, I thank you so much for coming, and thank you, Linda, because this is a meeting. Dr. Freeman and I were in a meeting where with Mr. Hoey, a number of the attorneys, Mrs. Malabati, and one of the things we brought up was a concern about some of the differences between Board of Ed and town employees, which is what created, I believe, the discussion that we see in this 4.2. But these additional questions are certainly worth asking. Are there other questions that any of my colleagues have? We certainly have people who have a lot of information here can share. It is my understanding that we as a board need to vote on this because I believe I have to sign in addition to the designee.
I think you have to be authorized to sign it.
That's what I thought.
Yeah,
Okay, so I
you
need
need to be
so the
authorized
vote
to
needs
sign
to
Authorize you to sign the
to sign,
agreement.
okay.
But it's an important clarification, I think, from the last 2 weeks that we're joining this, recognizing that there are some open design questions, and those design questions will be closed, including representation of the Board of Education. That's an important clarification tonight.
Okay. So
Before you get to that.
please go ahead.
Because this is a very excellent point, actually. The Board of Ed is a party to the trust.
Yes.
So, and as the town ordinance that was adopted, I think about a month ago, any amendments to the OPEB Trust agreement do require the Board of Ed's agreement. So the town does not have the ability to
Change
change
the
the
deal.
number
Change the deal.
or
Yep.
to 10 from 5.
Yep.
So I just, you know,
And so
Require the entire board or just the designee?
no, this would.
The entire board.
to move in.
The Board of Ed, just like the Board of Selectmen.
For an
In other
amendment,
words,
right.
if in 3 years from now, there was a change to 4.2,
right.
you would adopt, you know, you need both.
We would have to authorize the chairman to sign.
Again, yep.
That's right.
Right.
Okay.
So, so there are then 2 votes we'll need to take tonight. That vote to authorize my signature on this. The second, as we discussed 2 weeks ago and is described in this, is that we as a board, we as a board need to designate to this 5-person a trustee group. Again, the trustee group includes the finance director for the town. It includes the chair of the pension committee, and then a designee from, am I correct? Okay, sorry. I saw
You're
Mrs.
going,
Trudeau
you're
look at
going, you
me.
got it.
And then feel free to correct me. And then a designee from each of the 3 municipal boards, Board of Ed, Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen. One of the requirements, as you can read in the document, is that the designee for the Board of Selectmen must be of the opposite party of the sitting first selectman. And so Sue Renner is the designee for the Board of Selectmen. Another requirement is that among the 3 designees, 2 can be of one political party, 1 must be of the other. The Board of Finance last Monday voted to have Bob Hartman be their designee. Since both Bob and Sue Renner are Republicans, we will need to vote on one of our Democratic members to be the representative for the Board of Ed. As this document does state, we all know that we are all on 4-year terms, and there will come a time when various people will want to step back, or potentially in an election, there'll be a change in the board. this document does then, if you are the designee for this board and are no longer a member of the Board of Ed for any of those reasons, we would find ourselves in a position of voting someone new onto that board. Obviously, still paying attention to the makeup of the other two designees at that time. Those are the two, I think, motions that we need to make tonight.
My understanding.
Yes, I
Okay,
agree.
terrific. So I am going to first ask for a motion to approve my signature as the chair of the Board of Ed on this OPEB trust. Mr. Sands, that's a motion. All right. Is there a second? Okay, Dr. Best is seconding. All in favor? Aye. Okay, so I'm
Unanimous,
seeing a unanimous vote there. So we have 8 of our members here right
Thank
now.
you.
All right. Secondly, is there a motion that anyone has to make to nominate any of our Democratic members for the designee position?
I move to nominate Dr. Hirsch as our designee.
All right. Is there a second to that?
I will second.
You will second that. Any questions? Dr. Hirsch, would you be willing?
Speech.
Your name has been-
Speech.
To take this role for the Board of Ed.
I waive my right to give any speeches.
You were willing to fill this role. Okay. So then I'm going to ask for a vote on Dr. Hirsch being
Thank you for
the
coming. That was
designee
helpful.
for the trust for this board. Aye. All right, so
Unanimous.
please let the record show that that was an 8-0 vote. Terrific.
Thank you for starting.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having me
so
here.
much.
And-
Really.
Rich, thank you.
And again-
Thank
and
you
again,
again.
Despite,
And I should answer that question. Your new advisor, the
Yep.
same advisor for their new name is fiduciary.
yes.
Okay.
It used to be fiduciary advisor, then it became DeMayo Schneider,
Schneider.
which no one liked. So now it's called fiduciary.
I like the mayor.
And a big thank you, Mary
Me
Jane,
too.
too.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Um,
And I am going to quibble with the chair. I do apologize that we didn't socialize this issue collectively, and it's not your fault.
It's my fault.
It's my fault. It's everyone's.
I'm part of it.
I'm usually a better communicator than that.
So, Mr. Ho, you also made a proposal if we want to talk about the funds from the fund
Yep.
balance. Is that
Right.
something we would?
I think we
We
need,
should
ultimately,
talk-
we need, you, Mike, and I should have a
Terrific,
conversation.
fabulous. So
um,
we'll do that, and then I will bring back whatever I
because-
need to this group.
They are actually the ones that hold the keys to
Right.
that decision. So,
Okay, terrific.
Right.
Thank you again so much. We really
Thank you.
appreciate your time.
Thank you all.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Matt.
What else is on
All
the
right.
agenda?
The next item on the agenda is COVID update. So Dr. Seaman, I'm going to turn to you for that, item, please.
Thank you. I want to start with good news. Last week was a 0 positive case week in Guilford Public Schools. Last week, we did not identify either among staff or students any positive COVID cases. I think that's the first positive, 0 positive week that we've had since October or early November. And we at points were tracking over 30 per week. So really, really good news. On the heels of that, I do want to reiterate a communication that was sent out to the community last week. I think in Guilford, the numbers of fully vaccinated adults moving around the neighborhood are over 50% of the population at this point. We know that students have begun receiving vaccine. We know that among our staff in the schools, that we are at approximately 90% of all staff members who are fully vaccinated at this time. However, the Department of Public Health in the state of Connecticut, the State Department of Education, the governor, and our local health authorities are all recognizing that the student population, particularly the younger student population, is not up to those levels. With approximately 3.5 weeks of school left, DPH, SDE, the governor's office, and our local health authorities are all encouraging the continuing universal mask mandate in the schools. This board adopted a policy change to require masking in the schools. we will be maintaining that. So we will be maintaining masks in the schools and at school activities as we move through these last few weeks. The last thing that we want to see happen with approximately 20 school days left is to see student groups who are experiencing quarantine and missing 10 of those last 20 days. While we had no new cases last week, we do still have students who are under quarantine. Now, they'll be coming off of those in the next day or two. They'll be returning to classes, but we don't want to put ourselves back in that situation. Similarly, and we have discussed this, I've received parent communications on this topic. We have discussed it with our local health authorities, and we've discussed it with our leadership team, particularly at the younger grades. We are going to be continuing the cohorting procedures that are in place as well. And again, this comes to the idea that if we have positive student cases, and remember at the younger grades, none of our students are vaccinated at this time, that if we do have a positive, the cohorting will allow, it'll continue to facilitate contact tracing, and it will limit the number of students who may have to experience a quarantine in these last days of school. I know there will be disappointment around that. I know that as the CDC began relaxing some of the mandates, there were parents who were asking to allow recess to be multi-cohort again, but we really feel that with this under control, with the case numbers down, with students in school for 5 days a week without quarantines, we don't want to give up the ability to hold those students and allow them to experience that end of the school year. There will be some latitude. There will be some latitude taken with those protocols around end of the year activities, particularly targeting grades 12, 8, 6, and 4. And even those latitudes will be scaled. We will be taking the largest latitudes with our seniors. Our seniors will be having a senior prom. It is scheduled for June 4th. It will be an outdoor event. This is huge, but there will be dancing allowed at the event. We will be allowing our seniors to have an almost normal prom, not completely normal, but very close to normal. We will be having an outdoor graduation for our seniors that we are happy to announce will be held on the Guilford Green in the center of our community. And seniors will be seated on chairs together. They won't be distributed out among their parents. We're continuing, again, just like last year, there are changing guidelines. There will be an 8th grade activity. It won't be as big and it won't have the same latitudes that we're affording to the seniors, because those 8th graders will have an opportunity to graduate as seniors in a few years, but we'll have an 8th grade activity. We will have a 6th grade activity, and we will have 4th grade activities. The 4th grades will be a little more constricted because, again, none of those younger students have been able to receive vaccines. We've been pushing student vaccination to our seniors. Even some of our 8th graders have had that opportunity. But again, those privileges, those special activities will be taking the largest latitude from the protocols around that senior class, and we will scale them back because of the closeness to your graduation and your last opportunity to have that special end of the year, and because of the likely prevalence of fully vaccinated individuals as you scale down to those younger students. So we did feel that was an important update to share with the community. We're really excited about that. Additionally, I want to reiterate a point that I made at our last meeting 2 weeks ago. There is a communication that is being prepared that will be going out to all staff and to all families in the community. But again, the state will not be requiring next year a full standalone at-home distance option for school districts. This year, all school districts, while the state was encouraging us to move to as open as possible, all districts were required this year to provide a full 180-day at-home option for families or students who chose that option. We have fluctuated between about 9 and about 12% of our population who have taken advantage of that opportunity. About 12% in November, December, November, when the numbers were really high. We're down to about 10%, almost down to that 9%, that low that we experienced. The state will not be requiring that option next year. And with those numbers, we will not be providing that option next year for two real reasons. One is that logistically, we will not have the ability to stand up that option for such a small number of students spread across 13 grade levels. This year, shouldn't have let Mr. Hoey leave. This year we did it and we knew that we engaged in spending beyond our budget. We knew that we were looking at creating deficits by engaging. But more importantly than the logistical piece, we want our students in the classrooms with us. This was an exciting CIA meeting today. There is simply no replacement for in-person learning. And we've learned a lot about technology, but it doesn't replace the in-person connections that are made. It doesn't communicate the teacher-student relationship, and it doesn't provide the social interaction. We've believed in Guilford for a long time that that learning is a social activity. And so we know that being in school with their classmates, with their grade mates, with their teachers is a positive. We want students to be in person next year. So again, there will be no option for what this year was referred to as Cohort C next year. There'll be some more guidance coming out from the state. We do anticipate that there will be continued need for distance learning. Should we have hotspots or quarantines, we expect that we will be able to provide distance learning to support students who are experiencing a quarantine. We believe that we will continue to have the opportunity to rely on distance learning as an option for weather emergencies so that we don't stack up 5 and 10 snow days as we have in some years that need to then be made up in June. So we do expect, and we expect that there may be exciting opportunities for distance learning, that we may be able in the future to provide night courses or collaborative courses with other school districts and leverage that for a benefit. But we will not be offering a full 180-day at-home option next year. Again, what we call Cohort C this year. And that's really the update. I will mention that we are targeting a June 4 prom, and we are targeting a June 17th, Thursday, June 17th graduation event, which Dr. Balistraci reminded everybody you need to take action on tonight as a Board of Education. We don't expect any more snow delays. We don't expect any more closures. We are confident that we can set that date and not have any disruption at this time.
Questions?
Are we requiring students to be vaccinated next week?
No, at this point, we do not have any systems in place to check on vaccination. We don't have any anticipation of requiring vaccination in order to access your free and appropriate public education. We are encouraging. We're sending out as much information as we can. We've made all the local clinic information available. We are encouraging every family to have their children vaccinated. It insulates the entire community, and everybody, just like wearing a mask protects those around you, having your child vaccinated protects your child, protects your family at home, and protects everybody around your child in school.
Well, I have the same question. I mean, it seems to me that now that we have vaccines approved for 12 to 18 year olds, now that the state has said that they are not going to allow religious exemptions except for the ones that are existing in place for other vaccinations, I don't see why we're making a differentiation between this, which is a very disruptive disease, and measles and mumps and these other things that we're requiring.
I think-
part of the issue- sorry, but part of the issue is that the vaccine is still only emergency
Yes.
use authorized.
It's-
It's not fully approved. So
Right.
I know that it's hard to require.
It's an emergency authorization. It's not a full approval at this time. I also think that we would tend to take our guidance from the state. So if the state were to say that they were requiring all school-age children to be vaccinated, I think that it would be a difficult position. If the board wants to discuss it, we can certainly have that conversation. But I think once it made it to full approval would be the appropriate time. I'm not aware of any school district in Connecticut that is requiring or checking vaccination status. We didn't require all staff members to have it, and I I don't see us at this point requiring it of students. I have had a number of parents ask that question. I have seen speculation on social media. At this time, we have no plans on requiring it for students. It could change once it reaches full authorization, and certainly if the state.
I don't know what the exact timeline is for that, but I mean, I can tell you that, you know, the health system is not requiring employees to be vaccinated to come to work, so.
And we also have students under 12 who can't get the
Yeah.
vaccine as is.
That's right.
I think Mr. Sands meant required of all students to whom it's open, but again, I think we'd have to make full approval before we entertained that conversation. And I would expect guidance, if not a position from the state on that, similar to the other vaccines that are required. That would be a legislative position. State Department might offer guidance on that to districts prior to the ability to make a legislative change.
Yeah, I just had just a question, because I don't have kids that have recess anymore. Just a clarification of what. A clarification on what, I understand the cohorting for lunches, it makes complete sense to keep them together because they're maskless. Are kids at recess masked?
Thank you.
Take the mask off to sit there.
I meant to mention that. I appreciate the question. So no, we are relaxing the mask requirements while students are outside. So any outdoor activity, you know, we were allowing students to take their masks off for outdoor mask breaks. The guidance from DPH and State Department of Education is that if students are outside at recess moving, it is okay for them to take the masks off. What we're asking our recess monitors to do is that some students choose to sit in small groups during, if you're sitting in stationary in a tight cluster, yes, we're going to ask them to wear the mask even though they're outside. Most students at recess tend to move around like molecules, and when that's going on, we are allowing them to take their masks off during that outdoor activity. The cohorting that happens is that previously, all the third graders would go out for recess at the same time, and you'd have all 60 of them moving around in that large group. We will continue to separate the recess. And again, it comes down to contact tracing. If we have and they still usually go out at the same time, but they go out to different sides of the building. If we brought them all together and had a positive case, and then reported to the contact tracers that masks were off and they were all moving around and there was no way, we could be looking at all 3 classes, all 60 students being quarantined. And so, yes, we're relaxing the outdoor mask requirement. I skipped right over that part. We're continuing to keep them separated for that recess time. That's one of the parts I know that parents are going to be disappointed about. And again, we're sort of saying we want to get through these last 3 weeks and be in a better position for students to enjoy those end of the year activities, have a positive summer, and come back next year to recesses being grade level again, as well as lunches being grade level and moving for specials and all those other pieces.
And it comes from, I had a parent contact me, I think maybe an email as well, but contacted me and asked about the cohorting at recess, mask or mask free, but in terms of being concerned over kids leaving for the summer and meeting up with friends and the social aspects of having been so isolated, you know, for the whole school year. And that was the question, was whether that could be
Relaxed. We
Yeah.
totally understand that. And I wish that we were moving in that direction. We did have a special meeting. We met with Dr. Nolfo. We met with Sonia Marino. We met Pam, all of our medical team met, as well as talking to the leadership. And just again, all of our local officials are asking that we maintain the cohorting. They were okay with allowing the masks to come down. If recess is indoors because of inclement weather, they're going to keep the mask on, but outdoors, or if a whole class goes outside for a class session, we can relax the mask requirement there. But we're going to hold on to the indoor masks, and we're going to hold on to those cohorting components. Thank you for clarifying that. I skipped over that. I didn't realize I had.
The thing that's on masks, is there any conversation? I know we can't, I wish we all wanted a crystal ball this whole year, but for the fall, do you expect that everyone will be masked? Or
I did, as
I know, right? As of last
2 weeks ago, I was saying that
Yeah.
next year we were excited that it was going to look like normal with masks. And then the CDC kind of surprised everybody. At this point, I just wouldn't place a bet. I don't know. And so I do think that the structures and schedules and I'm not picturing strict cohorting next year with or without masks. And I think that will probably be a decision that gets communicated deep into the summer. Yes.
That's what I figured. Okay, I'm getting that question from a couple of parents, asking us to predict, from 3 months from now, we just can't.
I can't wait to see kids smiling again. But again, I think that
Yeah.
guidance will come later.
Okay, great.
All right, thank you very
Thank you.
much. So we do then have the added agenda item to vote to approve a graduation date of Thursday, June 17th, with a rain date of June 18th.
And that's an important clarification. And historically, we have scheduled
Right.
a graduation date with an outdoor plan for the green and then a fallback location indoors at Guilford High School. This year, we will be planning 2 outdoor dates, a Thursday and a Friday rain date. There is no indoor option being planned at this time.
Any questions? I'm gonna ask for a motion then.
So moved.
So moved. Second? Second. Any other conversation? All right,
Looking
all,
forward to it.
I'm so happy.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, this is so much easier than looking at
I
boxes.
know.
I just have to tell you.
Thank you all very much. That's
All right.
exciting.
Terrific, so that passes. That does bring us to the end of our workshop meeting tonight. So I am gonna ask for a motion to adjourn. Mrs. Sullivan? Second. Second? All in favor for adjournment?
Aye.
Aye, wonderful, thank you.